Berkeley. Craig Forrest is from Georgia Tech, and Claire Dorsett, who's from Case Western University. And if you'd bring them all on, I'm also joined by Sabrina Merlo. We used to work together on Maker Faire, and she is now at the Jacobs Design Institute, and she'll be talking, and she's also helping to organize this ISAM conference. So let me, all right, well, just wait a second as that comes on. But as participants, I just welcome you all. If you have a chance and want to drop a line in the chat saying where you're from, if you're involved with University Makerspaces, we'd like to recognize that. It's always fun to see where people are coming from. There's a Q&A function. You can use that to ask questions of our panelists. We'll try to get those in as we can. Please go to that. And there's Sabrina and Eric, and Claire, and Craig. So we're all here. Good. Welcome, everyone. Nice to
Thank
have you.
you.
So again, Claire Dorsett from Case Western Reserve University, I should say. Eric Paulos from UC Berkeley. Sabrina Merlo, also UC Berkeley. And Craig Forrest of Georgia Tech. So Claire, why don't we start with you and just give us a bit of background on Thinkbox and what your role is and what the role of Thinkbox is in the university.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dale, for having us here tonight. Happy to join this wonderful team. I'm Claire Dorsett from Sears Thinkbox at Case Western Reserve University. You're right. We are the largest open access innovation center and makerspace in the US, to the best of our knowledge. We are 50,000 square feet and 7 dedicated themed floors supporting innovation in all its forms, from laser cutters to welding shops, wood shops, and metal shops. Functionally, our impact is 51% of all of our undergraduates enrolled in the last academic year used Thinkbox. We had almost 81,000 visits over the course of that year by 5,500 users. So incredible impact. And I mentioned open access. That means we don't just serve our campus community, we serve the broader community. We are open to anybody, regardless of your background or your experience levels, at no cost for membership, no cost for trainings, and no cost for machine use. You pay only for the materials you need. In terms of history, Dale, I know you asked about that. We've been around since about 2012. We started as a few thousand square feet in the basement of an engineering building, and we have grown since then. We took over that 7-floor building I mentioned here on campus with the vision of some incredible funders who helped make that happen. And we have scaled up to those 50,000 square feet. So
like 7 stories, is it?
7 stories, that's right.
That's right.
7
So
stories.
from a basement to a 7-story standalone building, right?
That's right.
That's great. Thanks. Craig, would you give us a bit of background on the Makerspace, it's probably plural, at Georgia Tech?
Sure. My name is Craig Forrest. I'm a professor at Georgia Tech, and we have a whole set of maker spaces on campus. The one that started it all was the Invention Studio here on our campus, which today is run by a group of 120 students. They volunteer their time to staff this shop, this multi-million-dollar shop, and they serve the needs of about 3,000 users per month. It's got all the cool toys like water jet cutting, and there's about 50 3D printers of various kinds. We've even got, vinyl cutters and sewing machines and foam cutters and all this cool stuff for students, whether they're a freshman in biology working on Christmas presents, or whether they're a PhD student working on their graduate research. They can come in and use the facility for free, run by students. And it's been a wildly successful demonstration that 18-year-olds can run $1 million machine shop safely and responsibly.
That's great. We'll come back to that, but I think apart from the space, I think one of the genius things you did was to really organize students as a club to manage the space and particularly to welcome people in and to help them find out what the space could do for them. Makes a big difference to talk to a peer than having a grumpy makerspace manager tell you what to do.
For sure. In a way, this is the difference between a traditional machine shop and a maker space is it's
Right,
student centric. And
right.
so by giving the students the keys to the space and saying, take care of it as if it was your own, come up with some rules and some training and make sure, no one gets hurt and you can have, this special privilege. And they've taking care of it better than we ever imagined. And the
Yeah.
wonderful, delightful innovations that have come out of there is really the students' hard work at the center of it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, welcome to Eric Paulos. I You have a similar origin of, I think I recall a makerspace in the basement, level of the computer science building, but it's grown out of that since then. Welcome, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Dale. And what a great panel to everybody here. And like everyone who's got that kind of innovative spirit and is just like trying to grow the kind of not just the conversation, but the creativity and the making. Yeah, so I'm Eric Paulos. I'm faculty here in electrical engineering computer science at UC Berkeley. I'm also part of what's called the Berkeley Center for New Media. And to this kind of context, I'm the faculty director of a place called the Jacobs Institute for Design Innovation. But Dale's right. Back in the days of really celebrating maker fairs, and thank you, Dale, for making that happen, among many others, including Sabrina, but she'll certainly chime in on that. Um, we did start a small makerspace. It would just seem it seems obvious to probably everyone on this call and certainly these panelists, but what if we could have a place where you could kind of come for the community or come for the laser cutter but stay for the community, people that just wanted to find a tool but really they met like-minded troublemakers and souls and creative folks. And Bjorn Hartman and I kind of helped start that with some other folks as a small space that's still here. I didn't realize till later, it was about 2012, and it was the first maker space in the whole University of California system at the time.
Hmm.
Now, I guess that's kind of commonplace, but I think like Craig and Claire, these were like early visionaries that, all of us kind of knew what was coming and wanted to create these kind of spaces. Now, much like I'm kind of blown away by the numbers Claire just shared with us, but uh, we have this basically Paul Jacobs was the benefactor who really comes from Qualcomm. That's where his kind of he like earned his chops, but he's also a Berkeley alum. And he said, I want to have a place where there can be art and design and making. I want people to iterate as quickly in hardware as they do software. He saw that as where people would go as a practice. And he wanted to have that be an educational element of the program. And he put his money where, that vision was. And we were able to put up a new building here about 10 years ago. And that's this Jacobs Hall. It's the Jacobs Institute for Design Innovation. Um, every one of these panelists would feel very at home here. There's, studios and tools and a maker space and a lot of things. But I also want to, comment on something Craig mentioned, which is there are maker spaces that are maybe they're for profit or they're things that are connected to not an academic institution. And I think all of us are very on board with trying to have early experiences and scaffold these students into leadership roles. And Craig really mentioned that quite well. It's not just we run the show. We are the faculty leadership. It's very much we're all in this together. Not all of we don't always have the best ideas. We want this to feel like a place that's a very level playing field, and just be creative. It's sometimes I think students get too overwhelmed that my project's not solving hunger or climate change. It's like it doesn't matter. You're making a very cool Halloween costume. You're doing some other very cool project for your tree house at home or your dorm. I mean, that is what we want. So the very open playing
Yeah.
field. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think that is a real distinction in this is whether a student can do a personal project in
Hmm.
this campus makerspace, whether
Hmm.
versus you get access to the makerspace because there's a course that uses it and you get to do your coursework project in there.
Right.
And it is a big difference. Craig, I remember it was a janitor using your water jet when I visited. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I got this great idea for blah blah blah. It doesn't matter."
Right,
It's
right.
wonderful.
And you ask the students, you say, can you make your Halloween costume in here? And then the question, even more important, is, do you feel comfortable
Yeah,
in here? Can you be
yeah,
yourself? And when you find they're hanging out in there and they're not even making anything, they're just hanging out because they like it. That's the key, that your culture's dialed in.
yeah. Well, let me welcome Sabrina Merlo. As I said, she was a big part of Maker Faire for many years, and she's gone on to uh, better pastures in ways. And been fun to see her work at Jacobs Design Institute. So, welcome, Sabrina.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's fun to be the interloper. I spent 10 years at Maker Faire and I'm still at 2+ here at Berkeley. So, I can see the other side of sort of outside of the academic sphere, and coming to this kind of from our mission at Maker Faire, really to
Hmm.
engage people and to really promote applied learning, like just
Yeah,
the
yeah,
fundamental activity of making something and the
yeah,
kind of agency that people who make kind of hold in and of themselves. Like I still am really bringing that kind of base value to the work here at Berkeley, and being in a building where people are making all around me, people are happy in this building.
yeah,
This is a really nice place to be. I mean, we can layer on all of the kind of academic and innovation and all of the other aspirations around what happens at a university, at the level of students that are at universities like these universities. What they're making is astounding, but there's also just like the basic values and promise, and benefits of young people learning how to run tools and
yeah,
build things.
yeah. And I think I visited, you invited me down for a design class exhibition a year or two ago. And I was really struck. I was kind of in my head, like, 5, 10 years ago, those students would have done prototypes on PowerPoint or, or drawings. But here they were using real materials, Arduinos, and, they were creating little gadgets, devices, to do with health or food safety or whatever, but they were actually be able to prototype those things and they were real, right? They weren't like, this is just an idea in my head. And
Right.
so it was really cool to see that. So, Sabrina, why don't you give the intro to the event that is bringing all of you together next week?
Sure. Well, the International Symposium on Academic Makerspaces.
Symposium was the word that was evading me.
Yeah, symposium.
Acronym.
See, you're in academia now, Dale. Um,
Isn't this a salon? This is just a salon,
the
right?
salon.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is ISAM 2025. So ISAM is a convening organized by HEMI, the Higher Education Makerspace Initiative, which is a nonprofit that was founded. Actually, I've been wondering, does anybody know the year? HEMI, Craig, do you know the year that HEMI was founded?
Yeah, 2015.
Okay. So peak heyday of universities starting to say, we want spaces that are cross-disciplinary. We want to gather, leverage this revolution in the democratization and the technology, and make this accessible to students, integrate it into curriculum, but also just enable students to have access. There was no forum for best practices and sharing best practices. And I'm like, how do you do this? How do you enable students to have real direct access? What are the safety trainings that people need to do? How do you log them in? I mean, there's so many fundamental tactical questions around designing these spaces,
Mhm.
that a bunch of people started talking across universities. As far as I understand, HEMI was launched as this nonprofit, and then out came the convening, the symposium, the annual symposium, and also because it's an academic conference, and as an academic conference, people are presenting research. This is peer-reviewed research where people are presenting papers, posters, and this year for the first time demonstrations. Um, uh, there's an actual journal that is the repository of all of the research that is presented at the symposium. And so that is the IJAM, the International Journal for Academic Makerspaces and Making, or Making and Makerspaces. So that is kind of the ecosystem of HEMI, ISAM, and IJAM. And we are hosting this year as a founding board member or university of HEMI. We are taking our turn at hosting at UC Berkeley.
Right. And can I just practical, I think you've filled up like right, you're at capacity.
We are.
Yeah, right.
We
So
are probably at about 400 people, and I counted, actually did a quick count of the number of institutions that are represented. So obviously we have teams of people coming, but I believe we're at 158 different
Wow.
institutions being represented this year.
158. That's great.
And so then we
And
have community colleges, we have state colleges, we have
yeah,
Ivies, we have
yeah,
even some high
yeah,
schools. It's
yeah.
a range.
And can anyone follow it online, or is there any live presentation of it?
No, we
No.
are not
Okay.
doing.
All right. Understandable. But
The
there is,
proceedings are published
right.
publicly. If
Yeah.
people are curious to see what types of late-breaking discoveries and research are being done in these
So, Craig, you've been
spaces.
involved in this since the beginning of ISAM and HEMI, and I'm glad to get someone else to use those acronyms. Um, but tell me, how has it changed? How, the landscape. Initially, it's like, hey, what is a makerspace, and does it belong on a campus? And we're almost somewhat past that stage, and people have copied those that have built them. But what are some of the issues that you see now that's a little bit different? I mean, I just something we mentioned earlier that Marty Culpepper of MIT was one of the first organizers of I think the first ISAM, and he was had a title of organizing all the spaces around campus and found 42 kinds of machine shop type spaces, but we might argue that not all were maker spaces because they were really run by machinists, to serve the faculty. And the thing that we see here that was different was this is a student accessible space, uh,
Right,
and the rules were different.
right, right, right. What made these academic maker spaces unique, with their super low barrier to entry, within 5 minutes, can you be 3D printing kind of thing? Um, but you're right, Dale, that there are hundreds of maker spaces across academic maker spaces, I should say, across the U.S. and also now many around the world. We have international attendees from the Pacific region. There's great maker spaces in Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore. There's some in India, and they've started their own makerspace conference in India called IAMS, Indian Academic Makerspace Society. There's also a group in the UK led by Peter Sheffield that runs a makerspace conference there called Unimaker. So this has really encircled the globe now, and the engineering schools and technical schools and many liberal arts schools have realized that the students demand this sort of access to these campus facilities just like they would have a computer lab or a student center. The students want to be able to 3D print things. They want to be able to design and build their ideas and make the world a better place. So it certainly is widespread, and so people come to the conference for tips on how to start and run if they're just starting. We offer workshops on the first day of the conference, typically for getting pro tips on money, safety, what equipment, how to lay it out, how to start, how to handle the politics, things like that. Um, some of the challenges today we see are things like integrating well with the curriculum. Funding is always a challenge. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, we have people trying to grow their space, and they want to keep it accessible, and they want to make sure that, so they want to measure. We're as engineers, we want to measure and use that data to feed back into improving the space. So there's a lot of papers on quantifying the impact. How do you do that? How do you measure it? And how do you run experiments to see if policy changes help? And we're trying to raise all ships. It's a community of practice, and so people come together and meet a few friends and pick up some tips, and then go home and improve their makerspace.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned funding, Craig, and Claire answered a question from Michael Griffith. Maybe have you talk about it? Michael's question was in terms of funding these spaces, what percentage is university to support, grant-based or foundation at your institutions, as well as alumni is often play a big role in this as well, that I've seen. Claire, do you want to just talk about that at Case Western Reserve?
Absolutely. So up until about 3 years ago, Sears Thinkbox was really part of the engineering department in Case. Now, our funding to start up and for ongoing operations came largely from the university, though, of course, university funding itself comes from a variety of sources. We were very privileged to have some alumni and community funders who really shared our vision. And so Larry Sears and Sally Zlotnick Sears, the power couple who have named our space, they really shared our mission. Larry in particular found that mentorship was very strong for him as an influence in his future success in industry and as an inventor in his own right, and that access to hands-on resources to just tinker without guidance or without prescriptive guidance, I should say, was very, very influential. And so he wanted to give back to the next generation. And he believed in the bi-directional mentorship model that we get from being open to the community, where you do have undergraduates learning alongside retirees and learning from each other. So the short answer to your question is our ongoing operations are funded by the university. Unlike some spaces at other schools, we're not part of a department anymore. We used to be part of the engineering department. We are now University General. That's like a library. That means we're a central resource to everybody. And we still pursue funding from alumni. We are still very privileged to have that kind of support externally. I will speak to one point Craig made about data sharing and data gathering being a central point of focus for the ISAM conference. We have found that in terms of pursuing funding, whether from university leadership or from alumni and partners, whether corporate or private, has been really bolstered by being able to demonstrate our impact. I mentioned some numbers at the beginning of this call, but we also just put in threshold sensors so that we can understand once people are in our building, where they're in our building, so we can say, hey, we need more staffing resources on the prototyping floor or more in the welding shop. No personal identifiable information is collected from that. It is just whether there is a body in that room. And we're hoping that that will also help us kind of create some of those investments for sustained maintenance is always a challenge. People want the bright, shiny new thing, but maintaining and repairing and replacing the old thing is more difficult. Being able to say, hey, we got this many hours out of this machine for this many people over this period of time, that really drives that funding.
Yeah. So, I guess to put it in other phrases, there's a kind of capital campaign to build buildings and things, and that usually does come from alumni or outside sources. But the operational budget's a key thing of like, and I think one of the things that university makerspaces have that others are often missing is staffing. Managers and people that really work with the students. In your case, Craig, it might be other students filling many of those roles, but too often you raise money for the building and to buy the equipment, but then you don't figure out the budget to manage the space. That's like a library is to have books and on shelves, but you need librarians as well. I don't know. Eric, do you want to talk about how
I mean,
you
it's funny
guys
that
think of it?
I was gonna say it's funny you mentioned libraries because we have a thing called, and they have similar kind of operational
You're right.
characteristics at many of these spaces. We have something called a maker pass, and I always describe it as a library card for making. You basically, you have to kind of do a little light touch to kind of understand some of the machinery and the access. And it works a little bit like a menu item where, I want to learn how to use the laser cutter. Well, do this. And then I want to learn how to use another thing. And some students just, they want to complete everything because that's just their style. But um, our program, it's interesting because this ISAM conference, the huge value is there are so many moving parts with that, the community of people trying to do this either at existing universities or, as Craig mentioned, there's workshops for people to try to figure out how to scaffold up or start their own program. And yes, there are politics, there are leadership issues, but it's also there's safety issues. The things Claire mentioned are really valuable about what should we purchase and when should we replace things and are we getting good use out of things? These are always like questions that good scientists ask. And then besides all that, and you know better than anyone, Dale, like what's the community? How do you really make people feel that they're welcome, that they are playing a role, that their voice is heard, that they're part of this? That's so huge. And all of those are things that people are, submitting research on. It appears at ISAM. You have other people that have very different spaces. That's another thing. It's not as if it's a bunch of the same kind of institutions. Some of these spaces are smaller and run maybe more by students. Some are larger. Some are things that are from a college, like maybe the engineering side of the campus. Some are from an art school, design. They're all over. And I think that's a feature, not a bug. I love that there's this huge variation. But all of the kind of best practices and discussions that happen not only on the stage at ISAM and through these archive publications, so you can go back and say, how did people deal and grapple with this problem? But also the side conversations, the kind of sharing of knowledge. So this is the place to come and be part of that.
Yeah. Eric, your Maker Pass example is a good one that I've run into with a few people of, whether we have a network of campuses that have maker spaces or we have a set of buildings and departments that have individual maker spaces. Do we how do we allow students to move between them, right? And so they say, oh, yes, I've been working over in such and such a building. How do you know what safety training they've had and stuff like that? Has that happened at Georgia Tech, Craig, of kind of figuring out how students might move from one space on campus to another?
So the foundational need is to trust the students. And whether it's handing them the key to $1 million machine shop or allowing them to go across campus to another facility, um, it's almost heretical in a university to do that. And so there are persistent challenges, and you have to find like-minded souls, through ISAM and other venues to try to push the boundary on this. And so far, now that the Invention Studio was the original makerspace on campus, now there's, I don't know, 6 or 8 really great ones. Um, and the trust between the students and the migration between spaces is increasing. But I would say, generally students probably identify with one space and then sort of build their community out from there. But if there's certainly a piece of equipment or something and they have a friend, they can go figure it out. But at least speaking for Georgia Tech, this is an area where we're still growing, and I'd love to see something like that where the maker spaces were united with access through some kind of a maker pass. But we haven't, to be honest, we haven't fully figured it out yet.
Mm-hmm. I
It
see.
that speaks to how, what's fascinating about coming to a conference like ISAM is just how unique
Problems are.
each school's
Yeah.
infrastructure is. It's tied to the origin story, who funded it, where did the initial interest
Yes.
come from? Was it student driven? Was it from the College of Engineering and they saw the idea of becoming more cross-disciplinary? Was it, it's just so interesting. They're all slightly different.
Yeah. It's a good point about the origin story because I do think, some cases it was students who started a makerspace in an area or a building that everybody ignored, and then a professor saw it and said, "Oh, let's get some money for that." However, I'm kind of proud, or I always find those stories rather appealing when it really started from nothing and just people made it happen. There's certainly probably those that come in. We want a makerspace just like Claire has, and
Right,
how do we build that? And they come
right,
in
right.
with that kind of, we've got the architect, we've got we've got the budget,
That's right.
we want
And
a
then they say,
perfect 21st century makerspace, right?
I've got emails that say, send me a spreadsheet with a list of equipment to buy.
Yeah,
And it's like, hold on a sec. Let's talk about
exactly.
the students.
Yeah. Well, that is a kind of change, from bottom up development, either within a department or, at a university, to that kind of, when Claire said we have the biggest, I could imagine someone out there saying, we want to be bigger than Case Western
Oh yeah.
Reserve. So let's find out what their specs are. We're going to add 10% to that, right?
There's still always at ISAM, every ISAM, I've been to three only, but every time there are stories where people get up and say, our school doesn't see the value. We don't
Yeah.
have the resources. I mean,
Right.
there is a
Yeah.
top tier university
Absolutely.
network that knows that to attract the top tier students, you have to have best in class makerspaces. Like it's
Right.
not optional anymore to compete for
No,
students
I
and
agree.
not
And
have
I
them.
recall, visiting, Case Western's, probably before even Thinkbox opened, and it had become a stop on the student tours, for admissions. And you did some of those surveys and said, something like at the time, 39% of the students that wanted to go to Case Western Reserve said the makerspace had influenced their decision. And that's a big deal. It's a,
Right.
but you're right, Sabrina. There's also like community colleges have been involved a little bit there, seeing them acquire maker spaces. They often don't have the alumni funding. Difficult sometimes to figure that out.
Mm.
Um,
There's another thing
and
I'll say, Dale, is that
yeah,
I just think Makerspaces, they're a little bit punk, and I like that about it, that there's like a
yeah,
punk element. And it's also in the university, there's org charts and you're in a discipline and what was your degree. And makerspaces are kind of interdisciplinary. They cut
yeah,
across
yeah.
that. And
No, I
I
think
think,
that's
I mean,
great.
again, I'm not telling anyone that's on this call anything new, but that is where the future is. The future's flavor is favoring the flexible, the people that can kind of really move across some disciplines. They have their disciplinary expertise, but they really cross collaborate. And universities are bad at creating that kind of structure, but this is like the coming in through the secret, channel here. This is like the punk element, like what's really going
Yeah,
on behind the
that's
scenes.
that's a very nice thought. Let me go take a question from Carrie Truman. She says she works in a university and supports workshop spaces for furniture and product design alongside architectural model making. I've had students helping with the space alongside of staff, but taking the step to have students leading or having ownership of making spaces, as mentioned probably by Craig here, is not an easy conversation to start. Can you offer any tips or advice of how to put at ease those who may have health and safety concerns about students running such spaces?
Right. So, my personal opinion is to ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
That's the punk
And
element as well.
what we have that we've made a deal with the students. Okay. Now here's the deal. Try this. Here's the key. Okay. You can use this space 24/7 for whatever you want. You can work on your bike in here. You can sleep in here. You can work on your Christmas presents in here 24/7. Okay. Now, of course, you got to be safe. You got to have a buddy system. If you're,
Mhm.
welding or something, of course, we're not disregarding safety rules, but you can use it 24/7. Now, in exchange, okay, you agree to volunteer 3 hours per week to help other students. Let's say when we're open, let's say 9 to 5 or whatever hours the students want to set, they're on staff during those 3 hours to train others, to keep it safe, to clean up, etc. But then when 5 o'clock and the doors close, hey, go crazy in there. And this initially starts off as a selfish incentive because they want access to the machines. But then they actually start getting self actualized where um, they love serving other students and they become more like the people they want to be in this space. So that's
That's a great
the
phrase.
student
That's a great
driver.
phrase.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really nice. And it also helps, one of the knocks on maker spaces and all this sometimes is, oh, you know, it's like being a geek or something. It's like it's limited to certain kinds of people. And I think that, again, our interest has been getting everybody involved and engaged in this. And that is such a positive thing to really have be part of your mission as a student to welcome others and help them become find usefulness in the space, but also which I think is a big. I remember one thing you told me, Craig, years ago is the most important piece of equipment you put in the makerspace was a couch, and you had students
That's right.
hanging out there to talk to each other, and I thought that's just brilliant. Just like
Yeah.
social space.
So you
It,
should have had us
it,
introduce ourselves by how many couches are in your makerspace.
you would be surprised at the pushback that you would get for putting a couch in a machine shop. But I'm
Hmm.
telling you, that is the gateway. The students want to see things they recognize and that won't kill them right away, And a couch and a sewing machine and a vinyl cutter and some Play-Doh goes a long way in an entrance to a makerspace. Maybe a demo wall of previous projects
Yeah,
that look
that's
cool.
that's a very good idea
The
too.
Put the
things
mill,
that
Yeah.
the
put the
things
milling machine in the back.
I was going to say the things that Craig's mentioning. These are exactly the things that happen at the ISAM conference. People talk about the really thoughtful design of how you come in, look at, enter, like experience what you can see as you move through it. Because if you come right in and there's this, really maybe frightening looking six-axis milling machine, maybe that's not the first experience you want them to have. So really, that community issue is huge. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
And that comes
Uh,
back to culture. I mean, that's what you mentioned, Eric, and it's what you're talking about too, Craig. It is just creating that culture of stewardship. To answer your question a little bit as well, Carrie, it is about trusting the students. It's exactly what Craig said. It is about empowering them. We have a slightly different structure, but not so different. So we are paid student technicians as opposed to volunteer. But same principle is in place where they have access after our open hours, after their shifts are done. And so it really instills that stewardship of the space. And if you're having trouble getting leadership to buy in, the HEMI organization and the ISAM conference is the way to do it because we can find
That's right.
among us a comp case for your school. We can
That's right.
offer those numbers, we can show you that impact, and we can help you understand the environmental health and safety and the trainings that we have in place to keep our users and our students safe. And so we can help you figure out what works for your space through this organization.
And Marty Culpepper, the founder of HEMI, professor at MIT, intentionally visited our spaces and invited us to come together to form this organization. There's 7 schools a part of it, including Case Western and Berkeley here and Georgia Tech, and that's because of our differences, but yet our common values, so that it is not intimidating. Hey, I don't have to be an engineering school. We have uh, liberal arts schools in HEMI. We have private schools in HEMI and public schools. We have all flavors, so that way we can set the example.
yeah.
Let's
Uh,
just also slightly give a little more response to Carrie. There's other things. I think this is really what Claire and what Craig were at least saying. It's about empowering the students. There's some other mechanisms we've used, which is rather than, okay, only what a classroom like the professor says, that's what you should be working on. Like you basically give them, they can maybe apply for their own grants or they have their own clubs that are given space to sort of have the voice of what projects they want to work on. Or we have this thing at Berkeley called DCALs. It's like Democratic Education at Cal, and it's student run sort of basically courses. And so giving them, this is basically just echoing what Claire and Craig said, but mechanisms to sort of say, we want you to drive your ideas, your initiatives. It's very hard because, their whole life is, I showed up to the classroom, I was told to do the assignment, I did it, I got an A minus, then I got the next assignment. It's like, now you are running the assignment. That's
Hmm.
often challenging, but students lean into that and want that.
Hmm.
yeah. Let me bring up a question from Andy Marshall. He says we're starting a makerspace outside of it in support of 5 local K-12 schools in rural southwestern Wisconsin. We're getting advice by the University of Wisconsin-Platteville. What advice might you offer? I'll just give an answer. It's like visit as many makerspaces as you can, and
Uh-huh.
talk to other people that are running them and that have built them. There really isn't a template for, replicating every makerspace to be the same. It's more figuring out what your needs are, and you'll see such you'll see things in different spaces that appeal to you and others that don't appeal to you. But I'll open it to panelists if you have any thoughts for a high school group.
Yeah, it's great
or
to see
K-12. Yeah.
so many different kinds of schools embracing this. I also recommend you visit University of Wisconsin-Madison, and specifically Professor Lennon Rogers there is a real leader in this field, and I'm sure he would give you a great tour of what's possible. Um, so, with the high school students, they want to be agents of change too, and they want autonomy too, and purpose, and the opportunity to master these tools. So I would be bold in trusting them and empowering them. And I think you'll be surprised and delighted at what they are able to do. So you could start with some machines that you can't possibly hurt yourself on, like a 3D printer is nothing more than a hot glue gun. And a laser cutter shuts off if you open the door. So you buy a 3D printer and a laser cutter and you leave the door open and see what happens. You want to create an environment where the students treat these tools as if they own them personally. And you'll find it's clean and the machines are working even after the end of the semester. Um, so we actually give the machines by category to the students to maintain and run. And so surprise to our delight and surprise, they're in there on the weekends fixing them on their own time because they care about them personally.
That's great. Anybody else want to comment? Claire?
I would just say, yeah, we
Okay.
definitely have done some outreach to, I mean, we feel very connected to a lot of the local K-12 schools. It's very different. A high school is different than, K through 9, I guess. But I would say exactly what Craig said. Like, you connect with the local university because not only, everything from having maybe they have tours here, but there's students here that would love to go and interact with these students and provide that early mentorship. Even so, I think also sometimes they think, oh, this is I have to be the most technical, fancy person. It's like, no, if paper, cardboard, just
Yeah.
like sewing, like I sometimes people come in the room and they just think if it just has the maximum number of wires, that's going to be the best project. And that's nothing could be further from the truth. It's just how creative can you be with other materials? Because you're not going to be creative with these fancier, more technical materials later. Um, yeah, and
I
we've also like showcased some of the student work here in the building. So I think that's very much, I want to see those same students show up here in our classroom and in our makerspace.
I also just I've seen, I guess through my years at Maker Faire, many high schools, working on curricular integration, but fewer of them offering like after school
Yeah.
access and
I agree.
allowing the makerspace to act similarly. Like, I'm not on the soccer team, but I'm really
Mhm.
into the makerspace, and creating that kind of equal emphasis and equal access on on student-led projects and opportunities to do sort of that co-curricular engagement, it be a hobby or whatever. And I just
Yeah.
feel like high schools don't do enough of that.
Yeah.
I agree
The
with that,
other,
Sabrina.
yeah, Claire, go on.
I think the informal learning piece that happens within Makerspaces, which is supported by that community piece, it's supported by the stewardship you're teaching, it's really important. And so offering access outside of purely the classes and the projects assigned by the classes that take place within those spaces is important. It
Yeah.
fosters that sense of agency, but it also teaches resilience. And so if you attend a college and have never had a high school makerspace that you've had access to, that's fine. You don't need to in order to succeed. The same thing is true for high school. You don't have to walk into that space as a student having a 3D printer at home and knowing how it works. And you want to kind of teach that. Teach being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Teach being comfortable, not being good at something that you've never done before,
Yeah.
and learning and failing in small, safe, supported ways along the way so that you can grow. Start teaching that in middle school and high school, and focus, I think, more on that outcome than necessarily what machines do I need or what curricular impact am I going to have. Focus on just planting that seed of resilience. And I think that the curricular pieces can grow out of it. The funding can grow out of it. What machines you need can grow out of it. Like Eric said, you can start with cardboard and a couple of pretty minor hand tools, but empower those students to see where they go with it. And their interests, I think, will scale in ways that impress everybody.
Yeah. I think the I think the biggest joy is seeing, you know, a student figure out that they have access to this space and tools, and they have an idea that they want to work on. And, you know, and I sort of sometimes feel like teachers will act like kids don't have ideas, that you have to tell them what to do. And that's one of the
Right.
reasons they don't have those ideas is because you're telling them what to do all the time. And
No,
to
the
kind
That's
of
biggest
right.
thing
create
is
that
having students that
comfort.
are in a
Yeah.
classroom with you, or you see them in the makerspace, and you see they're like, I was doing insert whatever their major, and they go, I never realized this could be a career path. This is
Yeah.
now like you see it. I've seen it just like the moment it happens, and I feel very privileged to see and experience like that moment with that student. And that's probably the thing that keeps me up at night is which students haven't made it here, which haven't
Yeah,
had that
I
encounter.
agree. And that's what one of the things I was really impressed with the community college spaces
Mhm.
is, you know, a kid that doesn't know what they want to do in life is wandering around a community college campus, walks into a makerspace, sees not just the equipment, but sees that there are other people doing things that they could imagine themselves doing, right?
Mhm.
And finds a home there and a sense of feel, a
Mhm.
sense of belonging, not because it's a course, but because they can do things and meet other people. I have this. That's a great way of saying it, Eric. I kind of have the same way. It's just, and the real opportunity on colleges is not just getting the tech majors into the makerspace, but really getting people that are, you know, going to go into social services or go into, you know, some other area to
Yes.
see that they both have the creative side and that they can do stuff that they will find useful and beneficial in different ways.
This is really the next frontier in higher ed is purpose driven education and asking a student, even at these elite schools on this call, we are still not consistently asking these students, what problems do you want to work on?
Yeah,
And how can we help you find problems that you care about?
yeah,
So we're traditionally been teaching skills at universities like these. And so a makerspace is the kind of environment that lends itself to asking those kind of questions and educating students towards purpose.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen
I think it's
projects
perfect.
that I see come out of a group where there's a computer scientist, someone that's a poet from the rhetoric department, someone that's from theater design or costume design, and the final project, no way would that have come out of just if I threw but five computer scientists together. I mean, there's just we need that in society. Those people, I feel like it's a little bit corrupt from within. Like I want them to feel that's the norm, and when they go out into these industries of the future, they go, "Why aren't you operating like this? This is the way everything should be." I mean in some sense, there's an odd thing. I mean, this is back to ISAM, which is if you think about it, if we're absolutely successful, then it's just so commonplace, it's expected. So we also try to think out as researchers, wait, what is our role once we've kind of finally convinced everyone? That's still a lot of open assignment that we're still working on that. But once that happens, then it's just all schools, all places. It's just expected you have those tools, resources, community. What is our role to push the next frontier? What is that? I don't know what that is. That's a lot of great things that conversations that happen at ISAM too.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe we have about 10 minutes or just under 10 minutes left. If you have questions you'd like to ask any of our panelists, please drop them in the chat or use the Q&A button there. Um, I see an earlier comment from Constantine. I don't think we have to debate. He's heard that California makerspaces are outrageously expensive, and it's cheaper to buy every tool you need than to pay those monthly fees. We can argue that, but a lot of people, especially students, don't have spaces, let alone tools. So, you know,
Well,
really doing
space is a
kind of a
big thing.
different
People are
thing.
familiar with like tool lending libraries. That's basically what a library is. A library
Yeah,
is a book lending library. And I think Craig did this. I think Claire's done this too, where you have to get students to stop thinking of these as these absolutely precious things you can't touch or you're going to break. I mean, that's going to happen. That's okay. Then we'll kind of get together and we'll fix it. Like Craig was talking about the students going in
yeah.
over the weekend.
Or
We
even
actually
that precious notion that I'm only good at these things,
Right.
right?
Well, we
You know,
actually put up a system, and again, I think that I think Craig did this and others, maybe Claire did, where you could actually just check out a 3D printer and take it home. So it's kind
yeah.
of like, oh, I could actually just, that doesn't have to live in the precious like place on the altar in this makerspace. Like I can sort of bring that, share it like with, we wanted the word out. Like if you're, and I think this is the same what everyone was trying to do is like other people talking about it in their dorm rooms and in their like, you know, all these different spaces, just like, wow, this is creativity and making is not just for in this one sacred space.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we also, in terms of not making it precious, there sometimes folks come through our space and they see the fire blankets above our laser cutters and they say, oh, you need to replace those. We very intentionally don't. We leave the burnt, used fire blankets in place because we want the visual invitation that you're supposed to use these. It is not catastrophic, we hope. If there is a small laser fire, it is par for the course. Here is how you deal with it. You know that. We've taught you that in our space. And it's not the end of the world, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't come back, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't try again. So if we had perfect, pristine fire blankets, and you felt like, oh my goodness, you were the first person to make that mistake, the first person to ruin it, that would have a different impact than, okay, hey, I did the same thing all these other people did. I'm probably not going to do it again, and we're going to move on. And I agree with what Eric and Craig and Sabrina and Constantine in the chat have all said about interdisciplinary. I mean, we all grow in conversation by being in conversation, I should say, with people who have different expertise and different constraints and different ways of solving problems. And that interdisciplinary piece with the agency piece that Craig mentioned, having them, giving them the agency to pursue their own interests, giving them the agency to follow that in an organic way rather than purely an assignment, I think is really key as well.
Yeah. A couple of good questions in the chat here. Jeff Ritchie asks, how do you approach violations of norms or codes of conduct in your makerspace?
Sure, sure. Well, peer pressure is very powerful. And when
Mhm.
you have, a community of students around you and they say, hey, knock it off, students don't want to be embarrassed in front of their peers. And that can be very powerful. But of course, if someone's not getting with the program, if they think, for example, that they have a right to be there rather than as a privilege, then we can remind them of the limits of access under certain circumstances. And there's been, now and then you get a few bad apples, but the community kind of corrects itself. If students are not invited back, once in a while, that's okay to keep the culture, strong.
Mhm. Anyone else on that? No. Okay.
That sounds familiar.
It's
Yeah,
a, it's
that
a,
happens.
it's a, it's a difficult one sometimes, but
Actually, there's some other questions on there I'm happy to
yeah,
answer too. I
yeah.
don't know if you
How
want to.
Jim Burke asks, how do you handle high demand on equipment that has long run times, or in other ways, someone is taking up the laser cutter all day long to do a project.
Yeah, I mean, some of us probably things. I think everyone does something slight variation of this, but probably not surprisingly, we have ways you can reserve that. So if you have dedicated times, we make sure that people don't overly book that. We also have a thing here, which is like a job shop model. We call it Jacob's Project Support, but basically you could submit jobs online and they're sort of 3D printed or done for you. That's useful for students that want to batch longer things, and we can kind of control that, and that's part of a separate set of tools that we manage. But we want people to eventually come in and touch the equipment, and we want them to have that failed print, like Claire's saying, and go, why did that work, and learn how to kind of iterate on those designs.
Yeah.
There's those mechanisms.
What I like to do is wait till the line gets really long and then invite the sponsor or the boss into the space and go, do you have any ideas of how we can fix this problem? And then usually that results in us getting more of that piece of equipment.
That's why Craig gets the big
Yeah,
bucks.
Craig is great. Um, okay, I'm going to take David Zakoff's question. He said, I've worked a few years in a makerspace and be interested in learn how closely you work with the university entrepreneurship centers to identify and support potential entrepreneurs, like things that come out of the makerspace that could be productized or supported as companies.
Yeah. Oh, go
Berkeley
ahead.
has,
Yes, Sabrina.
we have a number of different programs that try to encourage people moving their ideas from kind of hobby or notions into the potential entrepreneurship kind of channel. We have a grant program where we just support independent projects. Every semester we have a cohort of students that are grantees. All the, sort of, and then there's a whole ecosystem of opportunities, contests, and things that we can encourage these students to participate in all the way through this year. Last year, we announced a partnership with Skydeck, University of California, Berkeley's accelerator, where we're actually supporting startups with Jacobs, hardware startups with access to Jacobs Makerspace. So I think there's in a way a continuum of kind of opportunities and initiatives to support students that are headed in that direction.
Claire, do you have a connection there between?
So our top floor is an incubator, and our 6th floor, again, 7 floors, so just under the top, supports entrepreneurial resources, even if you aren't in the incubator. We have found that that's deeply impactful having an all-in-one space. So we don't have to send folks who are interested in entrepreneurship to a different space than we have folks who are creating the rapid prototypes for entrepreneurship. Being able to understand and see the full ecosystem, and frankly, being able to have those natural interactions where people run into each other in the space. Hey, I have an idea. Hey, I have a skill set. Let's work together. And seeing what grows out of that is really impactful. We work closely with the Veal Institute for Entrepreneurship, which is our main, I would say, the driver of our entrepreneurial ecosystem for undergraduates in particular here on campus. And that partnership has been key as well, having them work closely with us. We host startup competitions that they run. We can refer people to each other. So just that open communication model has been huge. And what we have seen coming out of that is startups who have gone through our incubator or not, who have just used the resources, they've raised, I think we decided it was just about $407 million to date over the last 5-ish years. But more than that, they've started to create jobs for each other. So alumni who have graduated and who have used our resources then look to hire interns from within our space because they understand, even if they haven't touched whatever their product or whatever their service is before, students here, workers here, they understand the vision and they understand the kind of grit that it takes to get there, and they're creative and they're willing to experiment and they're willing to iterate, and that makes all the difference. So entrepreneurship is making.
Yeah, that's great. Robinson Salazar Rua asked a question of Claire, but I'm going to use it as a wrap-up question for all of us. This is from your perspective. What's been one of the most surprising or meaningful impacts that you've seen emerge from a student project or a collaboration that started in the makerspace? Craig?
It's hard to think of just one. I mean, I love it when students when students realize that this is who they want to be. They came to the university, maybe they changed their major, maybe they changed their group of friends they hang out with, but they leave with the makerspace being the most salient part of their college experience, and they choose their life's work based on the types of things they were doing in there. So we've seen that happen many times, and it always makes me so happy to see that someone discovered who they want to be in the makerspace.
That's great. Eric?
I mean, I'm with Craig. There's like too many to pick out, probably. I don't know. I would say one thing, and this is a little bit back at you, Dale, is I know for a lot of the projects, yes, we tell them this is great work. They get excited, but for them to get the chance to show things at Maker Faire was huge. That was a huge impact on them. And so just the fact that you opened this conversation to this broader audience, I think people that have wanted to help people with, learning disabilities or differently challenged kind of with mobility or prosthetics, and that they could work directly with someone with those challenges and iterate on the designs and change someone's life. That's the ones that are amazing. And people, and like I think Claire was mentioning this before, they bring in their own problems. Like maybe it's my sibling is has is on the autism spectrum, and they struggle with certain things, and I want to design some tools for them. So some of those problems come from very firsthand experience, and it feels very genuine and beautiful when those happen. And they're also now they're startups, which is kind of what Claire's talking about with how do they kind of scaffold up and become things.
Right. And often the unexpected, person that ends up having a startup or having a product. That's what's really satisfying. They didn't think they were on that path and
The person
discovered
that
they
doesn't
were.
sound like the entrepreneur dropping
Yeah,
buzzwords.
exactly. Claire,
Hmm.
do you,
I'm gonna piggyback off of what Craig said. It's hard to choose just one, but B, watching people discover who they want to be. And I'll take that a step further and I'll say, watching people discover how they want to help others discover who they want to be. We've had a number of folks come through, even who are not student technicians, who take the experiences they've had in the makerspace with them and try to support others in that way too. So, a very literal example, we have a student here who's still an undergrad. He was one of our student workers for a brief point in time, and now he has too many other directions in which he's being pulled. But he took some of what he learned here, met with a lot of us to learn about our models, and then took it back to help launch a tech center in Tanzania near his home and named it Think Studio as an homage to his experience at Thinkbox because he wanted to facilitate that same kind of experience for others. So it drove who he wants to be and how he wants to help others become their fullest potential. And I think that is particularly beautiful. We see that in our entrepreneurs who are lifting each other up. We see it in makers who are going out into the community, as Eric said, who are designing mobility solutions for others, who are running fix-it clinics for folks to, cut down on replacement and build up repairs. Really just the culture of internalizing and then starting to give back.
yeah. Sabrina, do you have any closing thoughts that can tie this into ISAM?
It's wonderful to nerd out with fellow enthusiasts in this space. But I guess I'm also just thinking about even the light touch, like we're talking about heavy adopters and the impact of some of the like real star cases. But I'm also really keenly interested and inspired by just getting more students understanding like how to make things, that hardware is hard and not just be 100% digital nativists.
Yeah.
And that just even if it's a light touch and someone learned how to use a couple tools in their experience in
That's
college,
great.
that changes the way they move through the world from here on out.
Yeah, it's sort of become producers, not just consumers idea. Well, thank you all, Claire, Craig, Sabrina, and Eric for being on this call. I wish you a great conference next week, and I look forward to hearing about it. And the rest of us who can't get in, um, look forward to hearing what things you learned from
Dale,
that.
give me a
But I
call. I
appreciate it.
got it.
No, that's all right. But anyway, I really appreciate you being on today. Thank you to our audience and wonderful questions. Must apologize to David Meisler Kubinek. I didn't get to your question on repairing things. We'll try to think of that for the future, but thank you.